Hi. Today I'm going to talk about another emotion, which is anger. So we've talked about fear, and now I want to move into anger because I think it's really important to start to talk a little bit about how do we feel these feelings and let them go. Anger is a really interesting feeling because it is a feeling that I think many men are very familiar with. Sometimes they are disapproved of a lot because this is a more common emotion that we see with men. But if you think about our society, this is an emotion that men are much more, is a much more acceptable emotion for men to have than something like fear or sadness. Because fear or sadness are considered sometimes weak emotions, and anger is considered a very strong emotion. And so that is associated, obviously, with the male energy. And it can often be the feeling that you see more in men. And for women or the feminine energy, anger is something that is really looked down upon. As a young girl, I was definitely taught that anger was not okay and that I needed to be good and I needed to behave and I needed to be very respectful. And anger was just something that was not appreciated. Okay, I don't think I wouldn't say that I was uh, told I couldn't feel it, but it definitely didn't get a lot of brownie points for me. And I was a very rebellious teenager and angry at times and really drove my poor mother crazy. But I felt a lot of shame and guilt around being angry and making other people angry. And I've seen a lot of women suppress anger and a lot of men express a lot of anger. So I would say it is an emotion that is acceptable more if we look at a societal norm in the United States and maybe in Western culture. Uh, it's an emotion that is more acceptable for men and much less acceptable for women. And so, what's really interesting about this is that I found that women feel much more comfortable with crying, and men obviously don't. They feel very weak and wimpy and have been called many feminine names when they show emotion, crying and sadness. Now they are starting to come into their more feminine feelings, or I wouldn't even call them feminine feelings, but these feelings that are assumed to be weaker or more feminine in recent years. And I think it's very refreshing to see men starting to take their armor off and to soften a little bit. But what I find is that we just get so mixed up in how to feel emotions that we can't clear them correctly, because emotions are really just energy and all they want to do is cycle through our bodies. And if we allow them to cycle through in a healthy way, then they come and they go. They just want to come through. But what we do is we resist them and we stop them and we suppress them, and then they cause all kinds of trouble in our body. Okay, so with men, anger is expressed, but a lot of times men are angry for years and years and years, and they never seem to get anywhere. They never seem to release it. Well, what I've learned is that's because underneath the anger is really a deep sadness that has never been released, that doesn't feel safe, and therefore has never been explored and released. And we'll talk more about how to release sadness later. But then, in the other hand, I find with women, and this isn't across the board, but more with the feminine energy, is that women feel very comfortable being sad and crying and showing that emotion, even though they may be disapproved of for it and caused to be weak. But women don't feel as much resistance to being called weak as men do, and so we feel more comfortable feeling our feelings, and we accept that, little girls cry and women cry, and that's just part of the feminine experience. So, but what I find is that a lot of women are really angry on the inside, and they just cry whenever they feel angry, whenever they feel upset, whenever they feel overwhelmed, whenever they feel frustrated, they just cry. And so, unfortunately, tears do not release the feeling of frustration, the feeling of anger and frustration and overwhelm um, and all of those angry type feelings. And so, what women need to learn to do, and all of us need to learn to do, is to find healthy ways to express our anger. So, what are some healthy ways to express our anger? Well, one of the number one tools for expressing anger is our breath. So, we will notice that anytime we get upset, that we hold our breath. And that is just a way of really clearly showing how we're trying to repress things, right? We get afraid. We talked about that during the fear video, but if we are angry, we will hold our breath, we will grit our teeth, we will talk under our breath, we will just, be boiling inside, and we just hold it in. And then we never do anything to release it except for complain and talk to people and talk about how upset we are. But talking about emotion doesn't release it. All it does is stir it up some more. And so as we talk about it, we make it bigger and we make it bigger and we make it bigger instead of having our little temper tantrums that will help release anger. But that seems so crazy. Everybody thinks, and we've been told, that feeling, um, anger and having temper tantrums is crazy. We are just a lunatic. We are absolutely out of control, and that is just not how you behave. But it's important. Anger needs to be expressed. It needs to be expressed, whether it is screaming in a pillow, whether it is breathing, whether it is going to the gym, whether it is going for a run and breathing it out and just really growling, like roaring. When an animal is angry, it growls, it roars, it releases that energy, right? Just like an animal shakes when they're afraid, when they're angry, they show you the anger, right? But humans don't know. We have to be civilized. Some, again, men will show anger. They'll get in fights. They'll scream. They'll yell. They'll control. And women will too. I'm not saying that women don't get angry, because they do, but there are a lot of women who don't, who think, and there are a lot of men as well who feel like anger is just not okay. They may have had an alcoholic parent or a parent that just raged on, and they made a vow to themselves that they would never be that way. Well, we don't want to rage on them. We don't want to express our anger on other people. We need to do it in a private space where we can release it on our own in a safe and helpful environment. So not only can we breathe, but sometimes we can scream in a pillow. Sometimes we can take our car out and scream as loud as we can with the music up, going, driving by ourselves somewhere where no one can see us. Sometimes we can take a plastic baseball bat and beat up our bed, or take a pillow off the bed and hit the mattress. We always want to make sure that we are not harming any other living being when we are feeling anger, but we need to release it. Recently, I actually saw, I think it was a 60-minute segment where these women were out in the woods and they had old dead branches and they were beating them over other old dead trees, and they were screaming and they were making those sounds, and they were releasing anger from their bodies because they had lived their whole lives without doing this. And I know you might think that's crazy and that sounds crazy, but it is very healthy. And when you do it, you will be surprised at how good you feel and how much it clears energy out of your body. And again, suppressed emotions lead to dis-ease. And so there are so many illnesses that are related to suppressed anger. And as we begin to befriend these emotions, to start to let them out in safe ways, then we can start to heal ourselves. And when we start to let go of these repressed emotions, we make space also for better emotions to come in. And often you will hear people say that depression is anger turned inward. So, what it is, and I believe this very much because I was a very depressed person in my 20s. I was almost suicidal. I was at the end of my ropes. And I learned that I had learned to put a sweet and happy face over the anger that I felt inside and the self loathing that was deep in there and that had never been, I wasn't even aware was there. And the only way I was able to free myself of that depression was to start to embrace that anger. I remember having a no smile assignment when I did my program. I did this program, it was a 6-month program where we had to really get into our psyche and figure out what was in there and heal it because I was in such dire straits in my early 20s that I wasn't going to make it if I didn't do something. So I did this very intense 6-month program, and anger was part of my really healing myself in a huge way. And I had to look at all this stuff. And it wasn't about me confronting a parent or confronting anybody else except for myself, looking in the mirror and finding out where were all of these emotions coming from. And yeah, maybe they did. There were things from one of my parents that I was angry about, but the anger was inside of me and I needed to take care of it. And whether my parent ever would say sorry or anything like that really didn't matter because the anger was mine. And maybe I held it for ancestors. Maybe I held it and it was passed down the line. Nobody meant for me to feel that, but I got it. And it was my responsibility because it was inside of me. And the only one that could heal it was me. Nobody could make it better but me. But that was empowering also because I could fix it on my own. Nobody needed to take responsibility or say sorry or anything like that. If I could feel it and release it, I could heal it. And I could then let go of any anger I was harboring about for anyone. And then I was able to forgive people in such a beautiful way. And there's a new word that I heard in my own mind recently. It was a forgiveness. So it wasn't so much about forgiving somebody for doing something that was maybe not kind or very hurtful, but I could forgive them, which means that I could free myself by letting go of that anger that I had toward them. I could feel it, I could find it, I could feel it, and I could heal it. And then I was free. And the last thing I want to leave you with is this idea that forgiveness is not a verb. It's not something you do. There are a lot of people who try to put a happy face sticker over things that have happened to them. And they're like, well, I just need to forgive that person so that I can move on. And that's true. I believe that forgiveness is for the person forgiving, not for the person who did the wrong. But if we have to try to forgive, then we really haven't forgiven. Because when we feel the anger that is associated with whatever wrong was done to us and we release it completely until it's gone completely, then there's nothing left to forgive. We just feel peace within. And then the forgiveness is all that's there, the forgiveness. We set ourselves free. So thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye.